Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Dr. James Hart about developing more meaningful workplace relationships using biofeedback and brainwave training. Dr. James Hart, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Greetings. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you today. You're joining us from Arizona. I'm here south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be focusing on developing more meaningful workplace relationships. And we're going to be doing it from a biofeedback and brainwave kind of framework and perspective, which is the expertise that Dr. Hart brings to the table today. As we get started, I wanted to share Dr. Hart's bio with everybody. Dr. James Hart is a celebrated research scientist with an established history of over 40 years in the study and research of biofeedback. Hart has authored or co-authored countless scientific research papers on the subject, and he currently has more than 30 patents for core technology, headset training methodology, and brain-centered portion of various virtual reality applications. His findings have been published in numerous scholarly journals such as Science, Psychophysiology, and the Journal of Experimental Psychology, just to name a few. Dr. Hart has also spoken in front of the United Nations. He received his bachelor's degree in physics from Carnegie Institute of Technology, as well as a master's degree and PhD in psychology from Carnegie Mellon University. What a tremendous background. It is a real pleasure to have you joining me today. And before we launch on into the conversation, is there anything else you would like to share with listeners by way of your background or personal context?
Well, there was also a postdoc in psychophysiology at the Langley Porter Neuropsychiatric Institute, which is part of University of California, San Francisco. And at one point, while I was there, after taking my degree, my PhD, I was an assistant research psychologist. Then I wrote, won, and directed a large federal grant. It was entitled Anxiety and Aging, Intervention with EEG Alpha Feedback. And upon the issuance of that grant, I was promoted to an assistant professor of medical psychology within the August Psychiatry Department. And so I have lots of research to share with your listeners on the relationship between brainwaves and everything that goes on in business, including the personal relationships that enable businesses to thrive. And we begin with the understanding that brainwaves rule. They rule your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your experiences, even your perceptions. And so when you can change and master your brainwaves, you can change and master pretty much everything in your life.
Thank you for that additional introduction. And let's start there. Let's start with your background and perspective on biofeedback and brainwave research. You just mentioned how that impacts everything about how we interact with other people and understand the world around us, but maybe unpack that a little bit for us and help us understand why that is so important.
Sure. Well, when you change, I learned in my research, because I was giving personality tests before and after the 1-week brainwave training programs that I was running, I learned that when the brainwaves change, personality, your identity changes in profound ways. So somebody comes in an anxiety neurotic with anxiety pretty much off the charts, 98th, 99th percentile on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI for short. And after a week of training, in my lab or now in my training centers, anxiety is in the middle of the normal zone, maybe even below average. And so Frederick Dodson, in his book, Parallel Universes of Self, teaches that identity and reality are synonymous. So I showed the first published paper in mainstream science was a demonstration that high anxiety people, when increasing their alpha brainwaves with my training methods, became low anxiety. And this was both types of anxiety, state and trait. Now, state anxiety is transient. You step off a curb and almost get hit by a bus and you jump back and your breathing is fast and shallow, your heart's pounding, but that fades. The more enduring type of anxiety is called trait anxiety. That's a characterological personality disposition. And many psychiatrists are under the impression that personality is stable over the adult lifespan. Now, they're willing to do counseling to tinker at the margins a little bit, or to give drugs to alter your brainwaves and thus your experience of life. But the idea that you can profoundly and permanently and fundamentally change your personality is, shall we say, novel in much of the field of psychiatry and psychology. However, I demonstrated to the satisfaction of the editors at Science, one of the top 2 general science magazines in the world, that you change your brainwaves, you change your personality. Then Frederick Dodson tells us that identity is synonymous with reality. So this helps to explain why people who do the biosovereign brainwave training have routinely such amazing, almost miraculous changes in their lives. Brainwaves rule. When you change your brainwaves, you change fundamentally who you are, and you change the reality in which you live. Now, specifically to business leadership, in the Harvard Business Review, Daniel Goleman published an article about emotional intelligence. And he found that what they did was they surveyed business leaders all over the world. And they found there were 6 basic different styles of management. And they ranged all the way from the authoritarian, which is, you will do this because I'm the boss and I say so, or total consensus building and refusal to act until everybody agrees, and everything in between. And then they further found out that the most successful managers incorporated all of these styles in various degrees and at different times and with different people. Some people would require one management style, another person or another group of people might benefit from a different style. And so the managers required a high degree of emotional intelligence in order to be able to shift seamlessly from one of these management styles to another. So here we're now at the topic of emotional intelligence, or EQ. Travis Bradbury and Janine Greaves, in their book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, describe how emotional intelligence accounts for almost 60% of your success in life. IQ, while important, only accounts for 10 to 20%. If you're really smart, but you can't get along with people, you can't hold a job, or you can't retain employees, you can't inspire and coax investors. And so now both of these go up with the biosovereign alpha training. The average increase in IQ is 11.7 points. And we know this is stable at least a year out. And the emotional intelligence goes up 15.8 points. Travis Bradbury and Janine Greaves, have workshops and methods, and they would consider the possibility of a 5-point increase over 12 to 18 months of a lot of work. Well, we get an average of 15.8 points increase in just 7 days, because again, when you change your brainwaves, you change your identity. And then according to Dodson, identity and reality are synonymous, so your reality changes. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
So you raised some really important points. And I like how you've tied in the emotional intelligence and the EQ piece into what you're discussing. And you've brought up, for example, anxiety. You've brought up personality traits. And all of this can then, of course, lead into how we interact with others within the workplace. And you're absolutely right. Some of the quote unquote smartest people I know, the highest IQ people I know, are also some of the most socially inept people I know, who also, struggle, to be as productive and accomplish as much as probably they're capable of, in terms of raw intelligence, because they don't have that EQ component. Or you map on top of that mental health issues and anxiety and depression, other things like that, and it really can hinder one's ability to work effectively with others on their team, or for me as a leader to be effective with a diverse staff of people who have different needs. And I have to be able to be adaptive and to be able to communicate effectively with people from all different backgrounds, different walks of life, and people, who need leaders to be led in different ways, right? They need feedback, they need coaching and mentoring and performance management in ways that look different from another colleague. And so all of this then goes into, I think, the importance of why the biofeedback and brainwave work can be important within organizations. And for me as a leader, to not only think of my own development, my own success and ability to be an impactful leader, but also for my team as well. So describe a little bit more then about how you start to counteract. If you are in a workplace, I'm a leader and I see not just the one-off conflict that happens, but consistent conflict where you have tension and people rubbing each other the wrong way due to personality differences. You have high levels of anxiety, whatever. How do you then, as an intervention, utilize biofeedback and brainwave work in order to help create an environment where people can have more healthy workplace relationships?
Well said, and some very good questions there. So let me begin by mentioning a dear friend, Gunnar Hertig, who has been a CEO of dozens of different companies. Entrepreneur. At one point, he ran 2 $100 million venture capital funds for Weiss, Peck, and Greer. And he's done the Biocybernaut training. And he said that about 70% of his time as CEO was handling staff issues, personality issues. 70% for a high-tech CEO.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, Bluer Than Indigo Leadership: The Journey of Becoming a Truly Remarkable Leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There's no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of our problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations.
And then we had Alan Markin, a Canadian philanthropist. I have had my Canadian center currently is sort of frozen in a move from Victoria, British Columbia, over to Bragg Creek, Alberta. COVID sort of like froze the move in process. But I ran for many years about 10 years in Victoria. And Alan Markin, who is an incredible businessman, with one partner, Murray Edwards, he grew his company, Canadian Natural Resources, from $0 to $2 billion in just 2 years. A very accomplished businessman. He set aside $6 million in personal funds to send people from his company and over 200 Canadian Aboriginals through the Biosabernaut training in Victoria, British Columbia. And he said of his employees who went to the Biosabernaut training, the ROI on a Biosabernaut training is 100. His own foundation, which distributed nutritionals to the often far-flung, isolated drilling rigs like up in the Canadian North, where access was only by plane, he said their ROI was 7, but the ROI on a Biosabernaut training is 100. Now, this is a very accomplished businessman, and so if he paid $20,000 for somebody to come for training, the employee he got back, he felt was worth $2 million more for the company. So that's an interesting data point. Now, in fact, we also surveyed, there's a word I'm going to introduce. It's called protagion or protagious. It's the positive form of contagious or contagion. And it's the spreading of good values from people who have done the training to people around them, family members, friendship networks, and co-workers. And we documented that people who did the Biosabernaut training would transmit, they would be protagious with good virtues, good values to family members, friends, and co-workers. And these results were confirmed by psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, ethnologists, ethologists, and economists. And so 2/3 of the, actually over 70% of the people who did the training 6 months later had significantly improved economic circumstances. Bradbury, in his book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, says that for every 1 point increase in emotional intelligence, using global income numbers, there's a $1,300 annual increase. So if you take the 15.8 point increase in EQ that is produced by the Alpha 1 training on average, this nets a person more than $20,000, and that more than covers the training costs. And then you have the next year and the next year and the next year and so on. And so the economic proposition for changing your brainwaves is very compelling. It's not just that you feel better and are happier, you're also more creative. The increase in creativity is 50% on average. And for many people, that's the bottom line, bread and butter, increases in creativity. And so we demonstrated that with a group of Stanford Research Institute scientists and a group of Silicon Valley engineers who served as a control group, who were in the lab, had measurements of other parameters, but no brainwave training. There was no change. And so we have increases in IQ from the training. We have increases in EQ, emotional intelligence, and we have increases in creativity, massive increases in these extremely valuable traits. And so, plus, which fact, there's decreases of anxiety and depression and things like that. Now, in psychological research, going all the way back to the 1880s, it was shown that anxiety impairs performance, all kinds of performance, physical performance, mental performance, emotional performance. If you're anxious, you simply don't perform well. People have described this as the age of anxiety. I remember writing a business plan in the 1980s, and I did research. I found that the 5 top anti-anxiety drugs were grossing $500 billion a year in America. And so that's a lot of anxiety. And so we have a non-drug alternative to that, because when alpha goes up, anxiety goes down. And so
can you describe, this is all tremendous, great outcomes. Mm-hmm. Can you describe a little bit about how the brainwave training works?
It is actually, we do brainwave feedback in the context of a 7-day intensive. And so to say that it's just brainwave feedback is untrue. For example, I discovered along the way when I was still in the university that emotional traumas going back all the way to childhood were impairing people's performance on everything, including the brainwave training. And so I did like a 20-year detour in my career to develop ways of measuring and addressing the emotional traumas. So 2 or 3 times a day while they are in the neurofeedback chamber and hooked up, wired, their brain nerves are being recorded, people interact with the computer to take mood scales where adjectives, feeling words, friendly, clear thinking, sleepy, unhappy, dizzy, appear one at a time on the screen. And then they push a button to indicate how much they feel that, either right now or the mood scale's done after the feedback training. You describe how you felt in your highest alpha, or if it's a theta training, in your highest theta. And so the computer scores the moods. They're standard mood scales. There are 21 different moods that are measured. And that's very helpful for the trainer. This is done with a skilled and certified biocybernaut trainer to see how your brainwaves change as your moods change. In fact, you begin to realize that, if I have this unhappy mood or anxious mood or angry mood, it's because I have a certain pattern of brainwaves. And when I change my brainwaves, the moods change. But it goes beyond that because I wrote into the program some subtleties which allow it to detect the existence of unconscious emotions. So let's say the word is angry and the person puts 0, not at all. But the computer goes, I don't think so. And it expresses its doubt in terms of sigmas. A 1 sigma is a 68% chance your answer is wrong. 2 sigmas a 95% chance your denial of anger is wrong. 3 sigmas is a 99.7% chance your answer is wrong, and so on. And so then the trainer can say, in the interview, I noticed that you said that you were not angry, but the computer seems to think that there might be some unconscious anger there. Well, then maybe a tear comes out and lips tremble a little. And then the story comes out of this trauma where the child was abused or neglected or, whatever it was. And then the perpetrator goes on the forgiveness list. We have a 14-step forgiveness method. It turns out that forgiveness is only effective under conditions of rising alpha. And so the protocol allows you to interact with the scores and the colors of the scores that show up every 2 minutes, as well as the feedback tones, which are adjusted 50 times per second. So you have real-time feedback on your alpha, and you also have summary scores every 2 minutes. And you only continue the forgiveness protocol as long as your alpha is rising. And if it's going up, then the scores that announce the scores at different parts of your head are either blue for it went up or green, hey, you set a new high for the day. And so at the end of the day, there's the people gather, small groups, up to 3 in the premium double training, where you go into the chamber twice each day, and up to 5 people in the single, where people only go into the chamber once each day. And so then you go to a room where we have canopied beds where you may sit or lie, and people take turns telling the trainer the detailed stories of what they tried and how it worked, and they get coaching. So the day starts, you come into like a conference room and you sit down, you maybe review some of the data from the day before, or on the first day you have orientation. You go visit one of the chambers briefly to see how it works, how the tones work, what the scores are like. And then your electrodes, your head is measured, your gold disc electrodes are put on, and then off to the chamber you go after an energy drink with MCT oil and vegan protein powder, maybe blueberries and bananas. And then you have a series of baselines, eyes open, eyes closed with white noise and counting beeps. Then you practice alpha suppression, and then you have a bathroom break, and then you practice alpha enhancement. Then you do another mood scale to describe how you felt in your highest alpha. when you first went into the chamber in the morning, you did, how do I feel right now? And if it's the premium double training where you're in the chamber twice each day, you have lunch. If not, you go to the canopy room and start your debriefing. And in the double, then you go back in, you have another session of alpha feedback, and then you do a final mood scale. How did you feel in that second session of alpha? And then you go to the canopy room for your debriefing. After that, there's dinner, and then we gather back in the conference room to look at the actual raw brainwaves and graphs of your scores. So it's a very thorough and complete journey. And the effectiveness depends on three things. There are three pillars. One is the ergonomic and patented technology that I've designed. Two is the optimized training protocols. For example, you couldn't come one day a month for 7 months, or even one day a week for 7 weeks and get anything like the phenomenal results we get with the massed practice, the intensive 7 days, which can run over 12 hours a day. And so not all that time is in the chamber. Some of it is at your data and being debriefed. And so it's a complete package. The third ingredient then is the transformational perspective of the trainer. Turns out that you need a guide for this work. One time, one of my engineers, who had a complete set of my technology in his lab, because he was writing software, without telling me, gave his business partner 100 sessions with my technology, and pretty much nothing happened because he didn't have the protocols, he didn't have the mood scales, and he did not know anything about the necessity for the debriefing, where you put it all together. If you don't have debriefing, like an astronaut comes back from a mission, they don't go have pizza and a movie. Immediately, they're surrounded by experts who ask them questions and extract every detail about everything that happened. That way, it's transferred to working memory. And a biocybernaut is to inner space what an astronaut is to outer space.
Yeah, the debriefing component, I think, is going to be really important regardless of the intervention that you use. So in your case, you just described what that looks like with your institute. Lots of different programs have different types of interventions. The debriefing and reflection always is really vital and important component.
Right on.
Well, James, it has been a real pleasure talking with you, learning more about your work. The time has flown by and we're out of time for today, but I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about your institute, find out more about the work that you can do for them. And I think it's in everyone's best interest to try to figure out how we can have more healthy workplace relationships so that we can be more effective in our leadership roles and help our teams be more effective, more creative, more innovative. Ultimately, I think that's what everyone wants. As always,
and I have a gift. I have a free gift
go ahead.
for all your listeners. My book, The Art of Smart Thinking, is available as a PDF. If you go to the website, www.biocybernaut.com/bonus, and you can download a free copy of The Art of Smart Thinking. It has 9 chapters, and it'll give you some details about how you can do some of this at home.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to get connected, check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.